This is like the first day of school all over again. Like, when you would set out the outfit that you're going to wear the next day and you just get like so excited and also really nervous? That is me coming back to the podcast. Hey babes, welcome back to Codependency Alchemy, your go-to podcast and community for the raw and sometimes uncomfortable truths we need to face to create relationships that actually feel good. Together, we'll explore things that are underneath the patterns of codependency, anxious attachment, and the mother wound, and learn how to build and cultivate authentic, nurturing relationships. I'm Alyssa, your favorite codependency and relationship coach, teaching you all of the lessons that I have learned the hard way, so hopefully you don't have to. And in today's episode, I'm going to show you the real-time moments that I still get triggered in my relationship and how this work of bridging shadow work and inner child healing seriously catapults not only me and my healing journey, but the relationship that I'm able to cultivate with Justin, cultivate with my partner, and how we nurture building a healthy relationship. So if you've ever felt invisible or dismissed, in my case, in today's share, you are in the right place. Let's go ahead and dive into this week's episode. Okay, babes, so I've got my journal here, which means this is going to be good. You guys are going to get a glimpse into my journal entry. I wrote everything that I wrote in my journal on this specific day where I was very much triggered in my relationship. Justin triggered the fuck out of me. And I think that it's really important for me to share this with you guys because I know there can be this idea or ideal that somehow we're supposed to end up at this place where we don't experience triggers, where we don't experience activations, where our partner can do or be however they are and we just let it fall off of our back. And sometimes that happens for me, right? There are so many times where Justin does or says things and I just let it roll off of me. I don't take it personally. It doesn't bother me. I'm just like, he gets to be and feel how he feels and I get to take care of myself. Then there's other times where there's usually other things, whether that's the environment or people that I'm going to be around, that maybe rock that solid foundation that I have. And in this case, we were going home for the holiday. I know this is January. We're coming back together, and this is post-holiday season. So I imagine some of you guys will resonate or relate to my share. And my hope and my intention is for you to not feel alone in your experience. It makes sense why the holidays are more triggering than other seasons of our life. You've got people coming together that have known you through many phases of your journey. And if you're on this healing journey, if you're the generational cycle breaker in your family, which if you're listening to this podcast, I imagine you probably are in some ways, going back home is like the most triggering thing in the world for me. I can speak to that at least. And what I notice also is that it's like as soon as Justin and I are about to go over the pass from, the valley in which we live now into the high desert, which is where we grew up. Both of us grew up in the same hometown. We went to more or less the same schools, graduated from the same high school. And even though we didn't know each other at all, like didn't meet, quote unquote, I imagine, but we probably did because when we shared, this is a little tangent, but it's kind of a fun fact. When we were growing up, I actually lived next door to his cousin. At one point, I lived in like a new house every other year growing up. But there was one time in my life where I literally lived next door to his cousins, who his aunt used to be his babysitter. So we probably played together and just like don't even know it or don't even remember it. Uh, but nonetheless, it is where we both grew up in our families and our systems, and it brings up a lot for us. Like, it's where we met, even though that didn't take place until our early mid 20s. It has a lot of great memories, but we were also very, very different people over 10 years ago when we first met. And I don't recognize that person that I was back then. I don't think Justin recognizes the person he was back then, even though it brought a lot of good times. It also brought a lot of painful times. And so it just like the land, the land in which holds our hometown, Central Oregon, for those of you who want to know, it's just like, it's like my body knows that I'm going back to this place that holds this energetic frequency that I feel like I've outgrown, for the lack of a better word. And it just feels like I'm pushing myself to fit in this space that I like don't fit in anymore. And it's really uncomfortable. And I think that that's kind of what happens for some of us when we go back home, especially when we've like maybe learned a lot about ourselves and are learning to overcome these patterns. And this isn't a hierarchy. So I want to be very clear. It's not like I'm too big, I don't fit because I'm better than. That's not what I mean. It's just like putting on a costume that's like a few sizes too small, you know what I mean? So I want to like make that abundantly clear that just because you outgrow a place doesn't mean that you're better than anyone that's still in that place by any means, because we're all on our own individual journeys. It's just like that place holds a certain size of a costume for me that I just don't fit in anymore. And so when I go back, I just feel like I'm needing to wear something that's too small and it's uncomfortable. So that's kind of like the metaphor, the way that I see it. And that's, I think, what ends up happening when we get ready to go back home, in this case for the holidays. It was like I could already feel like someone was like, you got to put on this costume. And I'm like, I don't want to. And just like everything's bugging me now. And like my body's already starting to itch over it and all of the things. So leading up to it, I think I was already starting to feel a little some type of way. But morning of leaving our house and going back home, I woke up and was like, I know how I tend to be. I know how Justin and I tend to be when we go back home. So let me be proactive, right? Let me be proactive and meditate and do some breath work and really come into my body and really ground my energy so that I can move into this trip with more ease, because I have this pattern, right? Like this is the gift of pattern tracking, which I've talked about in previous episodes. I even have a Substack that goes into like pattern tracking a little bit more. I should actually just do a whole dedicated something to it, but I'll list that Substack below. But pattern tracking is so helpful because like if you know that for me, I know every time I go home, I feel some type of way. So it's like, okay, now that I know that every time I go back home, I feel some type of way, what can I do to support myself when that comes up again? Right? So same thing with Justin and playing video games, for example, like a very real day-to-day example. I know I feel some type of way when Justin plays video games for an extended period of time. So knowing that that is my pattern to start to shut down or start to dissociate or start to withdraw, like every time he plays for an extended period of time, I can now think of a way to support myself when that comes up again, because he's going to play video games for an extended period of time. Like that's going to happen until it doesn't happen, but I'm not going to fantasize about a world where that doesn't happen, because then that just causes my suffering. I'm going to be present to my life. If this is what's here, how can I support myself in this right now? So same thing. I know I go back home. How am I going to support myself? Well, I'm going to meditate, ground, and just do some breath work, come into my body so I can really hold myself through what tends to be an uncomfortable situation. And that was great. I was so proud of myself and I was very calm and I was like, all right, I'm ready. I'm going to get packed and we're going to go. And the house was already clean. So it was just like, it was going to be perfect. And that lasted a good 20 something minutes. This is why I think it's important, because this is very real. It's like you can do all the things and still get triggered. Like, that's going to happen. It just, this is what is. This is what's here for me. Instead of being like, oh, I didn't do it good enough, or like, oh, I thought, like, why, when am I going to be free of this? It's just like, instead, it's here. It's here. So how am I going to hold myself through it? We get so wrapped up in just shaming ourselves and going and spending so much energy being like, but I meditated, I did the thing. When am I going to be better? Like, why am I so broken? Is that helping? Doesn't help me. And I'm not saying I don't go there sometimes, but I try to remember, like, I'm spending my energy no matter what. What am I going to spend my energy on? Berating myself and telling myself that I'm still not good enough and I didn't do it right, and when am I just going to be better already? And just be like, you know what? I'm triggered, so how am I going to hold myself through this, right? So I'm noticing that I'm packing our suitcase and I'm starting to feel a little overwhelmed because I've got to pack our stuff, or I've got to pack my stuff. He's got to pack his stuff. We got to pack Frank's stuff. We are going to be gone for a week, so we need to pack food stuff. And I was like, okay, there's just a lot of things to do and I'm feeling overwhelmed. I think I had a work thing that morning too, so it was just a lot. And I was looking back on it. I didn't really see it at the time, but I think I was being a little passive aggressive in the way that I was communicating to Justin. But I thought I was just communicating, right? This is why reflection is so important, people. But I realized as I was starting to feel like weight on top of me, weight on top of me, weight on top of me, I was like, I can ask my partner for help. If it's too much, I can just pause. I can identify the things that I need to do, and I can delegate and ask for support. And so I did. I was like, hey, babe, can you pack Frank's stuff? And he was like, absolutely. And he did it. And I was like, okay, this is great. I can ask for help, I can receive support, and I can just like have a little bit more space. And this is oftentimes what we don't do because we think we have to do all the things. And, well, I don't want to ask him for help because maybe he'll be upset. And I was taking him away from something that he was doing. And I don't want to say what he was, but it wasn't like he was like, yeah, sure, I'd love to do that, and like started hopping and skipping into the kitchen to put all the thing or pack the stuff. But that's oftentimes why we don't ask for help, right? Because they're not going to hop and skip doing all the stuff. But are you hopping and skipping doing the stuff? It's like there's just things that we're going to have to do that we don't want to do or don't, like to do. And we get to have our feelings when we're doing the thing that we don't want to do, just like they get to have their feelings when they're doing the thing they don't want to do. But at the end of the day, the things need to get in the car. So ask for help. If someone's going to be upset, it's either going to be you or them. But at least if they're doing it and they're grumpy, they're probably not going to be resentful over it because it's done so quickly, right? Whereas if it's you and you're already building up resentment, then that's just going to pile up. And then that's going to affect how you treat them. And that's going to affect how you show up in your relationship with them. It's going to affect how you show up in conversations with them, et cetera, et cetera. So to sum it all up, the morning was a little crunchy. I was kind of a little crunchy. Justin was a little crunchy. Even getting things in the car and getting to the gas station, I finally was like, are we okay? Are we good? Do we need to have a clearing? Like, what can we just put to bed here so we can enjoy? And he was like, well, you're being grumpy towards me. And I was like, well, you're being grumpy towards me. Like, we did not have a very constructive conversation, but we ended up just being able to kind of like laugh it off a little bit and then ground, which was great. So like we got there, even though it was a little messy at first, but we got there. So we got over the pass and we went to lunch, and then this is where things started getting tricky. again. And by tricky, I mean crunchy. And by crunchy, I mean I'm triggered. I start noticing this pattern that happened all the time when we lived in Bend, which is I make plans or try to make plans to see certain people, and Justin doesn't want to go, or he doesn't want to spend time with people. And it just becomes this like war between the two of us. My extroverted, socializing self, his introverted, doesn't need to see anyone for the rest of his life self. And it's like the two worlds collide. And what's interesting is that like I don't feel like we have that in Portland so much. I don't know if it's I don't know why. I'm still exploring that, but it just felt like okay, now that regression feeling. Like we've taken so many steps forward. How are we back here where we're doing the same things that we did? We've been in Portland for 3 years now. We're doing the same things that we did 3 years ago. That sucked. And so basically, how I experience this pattern is I put something on the table, and I've tried to do this better than I did before. Before I would just plan the thing and I would tell him what we were doing and tell him that he had to go, and that was it. Like now I'm trying to be like, hey, these are some people who are on our list to see this trip. When are some good times that feel good for you? And then there's like some people where I'm like, I could probably just go see this person by myself. So I was like, I'm going to plan this and this and this while you're at work. But these couple people are people that I'd like to see together, like as a couple. And so I'm trying to be like more collaborative instead of like telling him what to do. It's just like, these are the pieces that I want you to be a part of. What feels good for you in relationship to these things, or in relation to these things. And it was like shut down, shut down, shut down. And when I say shut down, I mean he was like, not gonna do it, don't want to do it, not gonna do it. And I was like, great. Pissed. I'm pissed. I was fuming and frustrated, and it kind of piled up through the rest of the day. Like I feel dismissed. Like that's ultimately what it comes down to. And fast forward to that evening where like I'm not speaking up. I'm also trying not to react, and I'm still haven't taken a moment to really identify. I didn't realize I felt dismissed. I hadn't even got there yet. I just knew I was pissed. I know I felt dismissed now because I did that inner work. But I didn't realize that at the time. So fast forward to that evening, he suggests, hey, let's go into the hot tub. Like we could do that tonight. And I was like, that sounds like a great idea. And it's kind of like this condo situation. So it's a community hot tub and pool. And we get our swimsuits on. I'm like, okay, this will be really good. Like we'll get to like sit in the hot tub. Maybe we can talk about some of this stuff. And we go outside, and he can see that there's some people in the hot tub. And he's like, well, I'm not going. And I was just like, it was the last fucking straw for me. I was just like, here's another thing. You don't want to do something. And his response is always like, you can still go. And I'm like, I know that. I know that, but I don't want to go by myself. I want to go with you because I want to have these conversations, and none of these things I'm communicating. I'm just pissed. I basically storm back into our Airbnb, and I immediately grab my journal. I grab my noise canceling headphones. I like aggressively plop myself down on the floor, and I'm like, I just need to figure out what's really going on for me. Like if we are going to tend to this, if we're going to heal what's going on here, I need to figure out what the fuck is going on with me. And even though I didn't want to do this inner work, like I just want to blame him. I just want to make this his fault. I just want to like point the finger and say like, this is a you thing. But at the end of the day, every relationship is a two-way street. Like everyone has a part in it. And if we're going to get anywhere, I need to at least make sure I know what my part is. I can't control him figuring out his part, but I can take responsibility for mine. And my commitment to myself is to always learn and to always grow. And I trust that as I'm learning and growing, that my partner is also going to do the same in their own way. And if they refuse to do that and don't have those hard conversations and aren't participating, well, then that tells me what I need to know about if this relationship is aligned or not. But I know in my relationship, every time I do this inner work, which I'll kind of get into a little bit about what I journaled, when I do this and I bring the conversation forward to Justin, he participates. And that is what's important to me, is that he's willing to listen, he's willing to participate, he's willing to get vulnerable when the environment is right. And that's all that matters to me, because that's how I know we grow. And also, I have the experience of our relationship, 90% of the time is like better than it's ever been. So that tells me that the work that we're doing individually is working, even though I don't really know how he's doing the work on his end, because it looks nothing like me. We are growing and evolving together. So I feel like that was a tangent, but queen of tangents over here. So I aggressively plop myself down on the ground in front of the fireplace at the table, and I just wrote, what am I triggered by? I love journaling in this way that I'm not sure is unique to me or anything, but it's like I want to have a conversation. And so I'll ask myself or my journal a question, and as soon as I write it down, I respond. And it, for me, why I like this is because I feel like it comes from this stream of consciousness where it's like my soul, my spirit. It feels very, it feels like I can tap into something on a deeper level than if I'm just like letting it all sit in my head, right? So I wrote, what am I triggered by? And if you want to read like word by word what I wrote in my journal that day, you can check out this whole Substack. I'll leave the link in the show notes below, but I shared like all of what I wrote down in that Substack. I wrote it all out. So for those who like the, nitty gritty details, that's for you. But the gist of what I identify was that I feel like what he wants or what he needs supersedes what I want or what I need. So like when I was presenting the different people who I wanted us both to hang out with, it's like, well, he doesn't want to, so now like that's like he just gets to have that and I don't get to have my wants or needs considered. And I think this is very common, at least from what I can tell, in our Codependency Alchemy membership on Substack. And just like the people who DM me and things like that, is that like this is something that relationships continuously bump up against. And it makes sense, right? Because my wants and needs are different and sometimes polar opposite of the other person's wants and needs. And it feels like, one supersedes the other, right? Like one just has like a hard no and the other one has to live with it. And I don't think that that's the way that it needs to be, or that it even should be that way. But this is something that we experience, right? I don't know that I have like an answer for that, but I do know what came to be in this situation. So I'll share that. And it's what I've noticed has happened more times even since this. But yeah, I basically wrote like he doesn't want to do this, so he says no, and then we don't do it. And then I asked myself, what am I making this mean about me? What am I making this mean about our relationship? And it was that he doesn't care about me, that he only cares about himself, that my feelings and wants don't matter, and that I have to sacrifice or settle, and he doesn't have to meet me in anything. So I just want to take a moment for that, because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who probably feel similarly. So I see you, and it is a challenging thing to experience in a relationship. And then I asked myself these other two questions, which I got from Byron Katie's book, Loving What Is. If you haven't gotten that book and you resonate with my content at all, A lot of the tools that I feel like I use are inspired by that book. There's some questions that she has in her worksheet. I think it's called The Work. Um, but she has a worksheet that was always super helpful for me in the very beginning of our journey. And these were a couple questions that I think are on that worksheet or are in the book or something. I know I got them from Byron Katie. But it's, how do I feel when I believe that thought, right? How do I feel when I believe the thought that my feelings don't matter, that I have to sacrifice or settle, that he doesn't have to meet me in anything? And I wrote, I feel defeated, I feel angry, I feel frustrated, I feel annoyed, I feel dismissed, I feel not important. How would I feel if I didn't believe that thought? I would feel soft, open, curious, spacious, compassionate. And why I love these two questions that she introduced in her book is because it shows me how a thought that I have dramatically affects the way that I feel in my relationship. Right? When I believe the thought that I have to sacrifice and he doesn't have to meet me in anything and I'm dismissed, I show up angry, I show up frustrated, I show up annoyed. But when I don't believe that thought, because at the end of the day, like, I don't know his experience. I'm making assumptions about his experience where he's the bad guy and I'm the victim, right? This is kind of like the paradigm that we start, attuning to, which is like he gets to decide all these things and I have to just suffer. Victim, perpetrator, get it? Right? Which is not helping our relationships. So I love when I ask myself the question, well, how would I feel if I didn't believe that thought? Well, I'd feel soft. I'd feel curious. Like, I love that I wrote that down. I would feel curious. I would feel compassionate. It makes me want to understand his no. When I don't think that he is intentionally trying to like make my life hell, well, then I want to know more about why he's deciding what he's deciding. What is going on in his head? What is his body experiencing? I want to get more information so that I can meet him and what his experience is and understand him better. And so I wrote that question down, and as soon as I got there, I got curious with myself. And that's when I went into the inner child practice. I asked in somatics, right? The inner child practice is a somatic practice. And that's why I think it's so profound in healing these core wounds, because we're getting out of our mind story and we're getting into our body story. And our body story holds the wisdom that's going to help us transmute whatever it is that we're experiencing. Right? My core wound is activated. That's what a trigger is, a core wound activated. And I think we see it as this terrible thing that's like a hindrance to us, but you're going to hear in the sessions episodes that are coming up that this is the thing that I want us to explore the most in the podcast this season, which is that when we are triggered, it's our invitation inward to heal and tend to the part of us that is activated, and not see it as this thing that we need to overcome and not have anymore, but see it for what it really is, which is an opportunity, an invitation back into our body. It is not an indicator of how not healed you are. It's an indicator for how ready you are for a deeper layer of healing. It's peeling back the onion another layer into your core. It is an invitation in. It is not a, I don't know what's coming to mind, but like it is not meant to be a hindrance. It's meant to be an invitation inward, right? And I really, really want to get that across this season, because when we begin to see triggers and activations as an invitation and an opportunity to tend to a part of ourselves, we start welcoming in the depths of seeing everyone. We stop living in this paradigm where it's me versus you, and where you need to protect yourself because you don't want to get triggered or activated. Like, we get to welcome the triggers and the activations because they bring us into deeper healing. I welcome triggers and activations because it shows me that my nervous system and my body is like, you're ready for this nether layer. You're ready for this deeper layer. You're ready for this deeper healing, because I wouldn't bring it to you unless you were ready. And I believe that to be true for me. So you can feel into if that feels true for you, because I honor your sovereignty and your autonomy. But it feels very empowering when I experience my life in that way, when I explore my life in that way. So I go into this whole inner child healing, which I'm not going to go into here because I already did a whole audio and post on it on Substack. So if you want to listen to the audio podcast version of my whole journal entry, like I said, it is in the Substack, Triggered AF. So I'll put that in the show notes. It's a good one. It's so good. What I uncovered was a 4-year-old part of myself, and the way she invited me forward in meeting her was so profound. And I don't want to go into that so much because you can listen to the whole thing, like I said, on my Substack, but I do want to get to the point of why doing this was so pivotal for my relationship. After I journaled and met that part of myself and uncovered everything that she was holding and gave her her new job, understood what she wanted and needed, I was able to approach a conversation with Justin from a completely different place, from that open, spacious, courageous place, because I was afraid to bring it up, to be honest. But this part of me showed me the courage that lives within me, the courage that lives within the part of me that was triggered. And that's what she needed to alchemize. That's what she needed to transmute, was this, not being able to speak her truth and come forward. And when I tended to her and saw her and transmuted that energetically with her, she showed me how courageous she really is. And sometimes I don't approach these hard conversations because I'm afraid of speaking my truth, because there was a time in my life where I spoke my truth and the people who I loved, my parents in this situation, they didn't believe me, or they told me I was wrong, or they told me that I was lying, and like things got bad. And so like what I was conditioned to believe was, when I speak my truth, something bad happens. I'm shunned. I'm, cast aside. And so sometimes I don't speak it. It was really a beautiful opportunity for me to step into that again in a more integrated way with this part of me. And I had a beautiful conversation with Justin where I was able to say, hey, I would love to hear what came up for you today. I didn't say, hey, I was triggered. Hey, I feel dismissed. Hey, this and this. I knew that I would be able to share that, but first I just wanted to get a glimpse into his experience without judging it. Hey, I'd love to hear about what your experience was like today. And I was so shocked. He was like, well, this morning, like, I packed the food stuff and you didn't like the way that I packed it. And in my head, like, I don't even remember that. I don't remember thinking that. I don't remember like projecting that. I don't remember thinking that he didn't pack it correctly. And so instead of saying like, well, that's not what I didn't feel that. I don't even remember that, which would be extremely invalidating. I just said, "Oh, you felt that I didn't like the way that you packed the food. Um, I didn't know that. I didn't know that you felt that way." And then he went into like why he felt that way because of the thing, how I said something. And I was just like, I understand. I could see why you would feel that way. And then as soon as he shared that, everything clicked for me. No wonder he's saying no, 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 no to everything, because these are some assumptions, yes, but this is how it all clicked for me. It's just like, it makes sense why he has this wall up, this guard up, and is like withdrawing from everything, because he felt inadequate maybe, or like he did something wrong. And so like his defense mechanism is just to like try to regain control by pushing everything away. I had like a lot of compassion for what felt like this like very young part of him. And I didn't need to justify myself anymore. I didn't feel the need to be like, well, I feel dismissed. I was experiencing what he was experiencing. Our relationships are a mirror, right? So if I can just hold him and love him in that, and love him through his experience, that's going to be reflected back to me, and I'm going to receive that as well. And that's exactly what ended up happening. The things that were important to me, he showed up for. And there wasn't a fight around it. There wasn't an argument around it. He made suggestions for things that we could do with those people that were aligned with some of the things that he needed. I didn't really care what we did. I just wanted us to be present together. And it was beautiful. Like, it changed the whole trajectory of the rest of our trip. And none of it required me going into all the shit that came up for me. And yet I still got everything that I wanted and needed and more, honestly. And I think that it's hard for us to wrap our head around the fact that that's possible. Like, oh, I can get what I want and need and some, without needing to shove all my shit in their face and show them what they did wrong. Wrong, if you will, right? Like, quote unquote. And so I want to give you guys that glimpse of what is possible when we just tend to ourselves. And yes, Justin did know what I wanted because I had told him previously. But when we came back around to that conversation again, it was more about me seeking to understand him and him having a space to be vulnerable with me. And I think sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes we how do I want to say this? Sabotage that environment where our partners are vulnerable by then casting a shadow over their vulnerable moment by showing them where they dismissed us, for example. I don't know what would have happened had I taken his vulnerable share and what he experienced and said, well, this is how I'm feeling dismissed, and this is what I feel, and this is what is happening for me. I don't know that it would have panned out the same. I don't know. I feel like it wouldn't have. I feel like it would have invalidated his experience, because that's probably how I would feel if I shared something vulnerable and then he said, well, I feel this and this and this. I'd be like, okay, well, here we go in that same cycle of feeling dismissed, right? But instead, I witnessed him. I witnessed him in his experience. I thanked him for sharing with me. Like, most partners we want them to be vulnerable, and then when they are, we overshadow it. We somehow make it wrong, whether that's intentionally or not. And instead, when our partners are sharing something vulnerable that they're experiencing, can we just witness them in that? Thank them for their vulnerability. And then at a later time, we can share these things that happened for us. I'm not saying that we shouldn't share with them as well, but time and place, like, can we be more intentional with a time and place for certain things? If our partner is being vulnerable, can we give them that moment? Because ultimately, the more vulnerable they are and the more honest they are, the more deep and authentic connections we're going to create with them. And then at another time, and it can be in an hour, it can be the next morning, it can be later that night, you can ask for that vulnerable moment if you need to. You can ask for that stage. Hey, I'm so grateful that you shared that with me earlier. I'm noticing some things for myself to have some spaciousness to hear me out. And this isn't something you need to fix or change. It's just, I feel like I need to use my voice and speak. Can you hold space for that? I just need to be witnessed. I think that that could have some powerful healing for some people. It teaches us how to become sacred witnesses to each other in a relationship, which is polar opposite of what most of us were taught, which is, oh, there's an issue, someone needs to fix it, the other person needs to fix it. You have an issue, I need to fix it. You're feeling grumpy, I need to fix it. Vice versa. But what if we just all got what we really needed at the end of the day, which is to be seen and to be witnessed? We are all looking to be heard. I'm sure you can relate to that. So don't you think that that's also something valuable to the person who you're in a relationship with? And this goes across the board. This is not just romantic relationships, this is friendships. I've seen this show up in my friendships, especially the ones that I'm making later in life. It shows up in our families, right? Which are most triggering for me. We'll save that for another time. So that was my journey of being triggered, going home for the holidays. And like I said, if you want to read the full nitty-gritty journal entry, which is good, it's a really great one. I did the audio and wrote it all out on our Substack. It's triggered AF, and I'll leave it in the show notes. And before we hop off on this first podcast episode back, I want to let you know that I am running a special intro offer on the podcast this season because I have seen so much fucking magic take place in the membership over the last year. And I want this to be the year where we just blast off into outer space in the membership. It is also basically the way that I can continue to do this work, both on Substack and doing the podcast, because I'm not doing brand deals with brands to keep this podcast going. Like, the membership is how I continue to be able to do this work. So if you've found any value in the podcast whatsoever, if it has supported you on your journey, it would just be so supportive and mean the world to me if you joined our Codependency Alchemy membership on Substack. The special intro offer has the podcast at over 40% off annually. This is like $5 a month, you guys. It is a no-brainer to me. It supports me in continuing to do this, but in addition to that, you get to have access to me in our private Codependency Alchemy chat, which is just invaluable if you ask me. Like, so much has been able to support people because they have a place to go to get support on things that are coming up in their relationship. And that's something that most of us don't have. And it makes the world of a difference to have a place to go when you're triggered in your relationship, when you're stuck, you don't know what to do, you don't know how to navigate something, or you said something and you're trying to find a way to repair. Like, I'm offering scripts, I'm offering support, I'm offering guidance in that chat every single day. And like I said, it's like it ends up being like $5 a month for that type of access. And you'll get access to all of my journal posts on Substack, plus master classes. So it's just like, there's so much that you get for $5 a month. So if you're not a member already, please join. It helps us continue to do this podcast here. And we're growing a community of like-minded people who are all here to heal codependency, heal the mother wound, and build authentic, nurturing relationships with their partners. So don't walk to that link in the show notes. Use that when you join so that you can get that discount. And I will see you in the membership. That's what I have for you guys today. Thank you so much. I love you so much. I'll see you next week. Bye.